So tonight is Ash Wednesday, and on top of it being my anniversary of being here with you, it is the first day of Lent. Lent is a season of preparation. The early Christians used the church calendar to structure their year as a perpetual cycle of devotion upon the life of Christ. They observed with great devotion the crucifixion and the resurrection of Christ, and it became custom that the church, before the Easter celebration, spent 40 days in a spiritual season of preparation. During this season, converts to the faith were prepared for holy baptism. It's also a time when people who had committed serious sins and had separated themselves from the community were reconciled by penitence and forgiveness, and they were restored to participation in the church. During this time, the whole congregation was reminded of the mercy and the forgiveness of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and they were reminded of their need to renew their faith. During Lent, we intentionally prepare ourselves and get our spiritual lives in order so that we can be ready to celebrate the glory of Christ's resurrection at Easter. Lent is a time that we use to intentionally try out a new spiritual practice. We make space in our days for more devotion time or for more time spent in prayer. We give up something, we fast from something as an offering of devotion to God. I love Lent. I love Lent because it is a time of being intentional with our spiritual practices. I'm always excited today about the idea of that renewed focus on a spiritual discipline. I'm always energized and I'm ready to move forward with intentionality. I always feel like, let's do this. Let's get started. But wait, did you just hear the gospel passage that we read from Matthew today? At first glance, this is not exactly a pep talk to get us all fired up about our spiritual practices. It's interesting as we're about to start on this time of renewal on our spiritual practices, the gospel message from Matthew serves as a little bit of a warning. Jesus says that when you give, don't do it for the fanfare, give in secret. When you pray, don't show off with your fancy words so that you can impress all of your friends, but pray in secret. When you fast, don't run around looking miserable. Splash a little water on your face. Look perky. Don't look miserable so that no one can know that you're fasting. Jesus says that when you are doing these things for the recognition of others, that you've received your reward. So what does this mean? Does this mean that we should never allow for a public display of our faith? I mean, we're about to leave here tonight with a very visible sign on our forehead, and whoever we encounter is going to know that something's up, or they may ask us to clean off our face. It's noticeable. We put that on display in some ways. So are we intended to hide our faith under a bushel? No, we're not. We're intended to let it shine. A little bit later in Matthew, Jesus tells his disciples that what you say in the dark, tell in the light. And what you hear whispered, proclaim from the rooftops. Our faithful practices should serve as examples of our faith for others. You see, today's passage isn't about keeping everything secret and not letting anybody know about our Christian practices. Today's passage is just a little warning for us as we start Lent to check in on our motives. Why do we do what we do in our spiritual practices? When our spiritual practices are an expression of our true faith and our true love and devotion to God, modesty will be the outcome, not self-promotion. So during Lent, let us all try out some new practices. We ask each other, what are you going to give up for Lent? And I always love to hear the answers to this. It's great that we ask each other these things and then we support each other as we're trying to do these things. I recently had one member of our congregation tell me that for Lent, she was going to give up 4 minutes of each day. She was going to give up 4 minutes each day to spend that time intentionally in prayer. And that her hope was that when she did that every day during Lent, that she would be on her way to making that a habit to spend time with God. Yes. This is awesome. This is what it's supposed to be about. Make for yourself a habit. Lent should not be about 6 weeks of doing really good so that then after Easter you can go back to life as you know it. That's not what this is about. Our Lenten practices should be about building a spiritual Lent so that we are building our spiritual life. It's all about our intentions. We shouldn't strive to be more holy because that's what we're supposed to do at this time of year. We should be striving to live holy lives so that we can grow closer to God. We should be building closer relationships with God because our passage from Matthew today shows us that our God sees in secret, and that the relationship that we build with God in secret is reward enough. That's not to say that our public experiences of worship and those public experiences of our faith are not powerful, or that they're not important, or that they don't impact our relationship with God. I have had some very powerful spiritual moments that have happened during public worship. Yet even in the public parts of our religion, the real change is what happens in the quiet of our hearts as we learn to pray and we learn to hear God. With our social media especially tempting us to live more and more of our lives in public, tempting us perhaps to share what we had for breakfast or to share another selfie with someone, our private religion is kind of countercultural. And Lent itself is countercultural. Lent is not about making ourselves appear more holy to our friends. Lent is about lifelong commitments to help us hold on to those things that will sustain us for a lifetime. It's about intention. So as we embark on our Lenten practices this year, there's a danger that in just going through the motions without really learning what it is our spiritual disciplines are to teach us during Lent. There's a danger of doing all the right things without really stopping to think about how this right behavior changes our lives, how it changes who we are, and perhaps most importantly, how it changes the way we understand who God is and how we relate to God. Our passage from Matthew, Jesus warns us not to fall prey to the temptation to use our religion as a substitute for God. Our religious practices are the roadmap. They are not the destination. They are the means, but they are not the end. So as we begin Lent, I invite each and every one of you to observe a holy Lent, by self-examination and repentance, by prayer and fasting and self-denial, by reading and meditating on God's holy word. Let us draw closer to God.